That's correct, right, Dr. Poore?
Right, that's right.
Perfect. You can go whenever you are ready.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, you will see that.
I can see it on my end. Mike, can you see it?
Got it.
Perfect.
Hey, so yes, thank you so much, Lisa, and good to see you again, and glad to know you're making a good start there in Tennessee, and actually pretty close to my where my family roots are around the Bristol area. And Daddy grew up there, and I spent many years and learned a lot about what I know about cattle from my grandfather that farmed out near Hickory Tree. So really glad to be here tonight and to talk a little bit about some ideas on forages that might help us as we go into the spring and think about next year. It's obviously a good time. We're past the holidays, it's not spring yet, but it's coming. You can smell it and on the warm days and feel it when the days get a little longer. So it is a good time to start thinking about how can we make the most out of our forages because with the value of cattle today, if you can figure out how to efficiently manage your forages and get gain on grass, you will make some money. It's a really awesome time for the industry. Unfortunately, a lot of folks have kind of depended on concentrate feeds, supplements, maybe less than efficient hay feeding practices and that sort of thing. And so we end up spending so much of that money. And so the trick is to figure out how can you inexpensively um, you know, basically get feed down into these cows because what they're going to produce is going to be very valuable. So that's kind of the thought for tonight. And so I'm going to run you through some planning ideas and really get you to think about there's three things you need to be thinking about. Short term, there's things you can do in the next month that will really make a big difference next year. And so think about how you might you might change your management starting tomorrow, maybe to begin capitalizing on some of the things we know about how to do a better job of winter feeding, for example. Then medium term, how do we get started off on this grazing season? What are some grazing things that we can think about? And I'll list out some of those, some I'll talk in detail about. And then long term, how do we build a better system? How do we grow more grass when the weather's dry? Keep things from getting so badly torn up when it's wet and that's kind of thing because we do, it's a challenging environment and is even more so these days. It seems like we're either in a drought or a flood. And I think everybody knows how that feels, that we all feel that way. It's really across really the whole eastern US. So we have to figure out how can we be more resilient and more, and have these systems work better. I'm a big fan of a concept called regenerative agriculture, and it means that we got to understand that our soils have taken a beating since by really farming practices before we ever got here. And even if you have even if you have some pretty decent um, uh, uh, grass out there and you can fertilize it and you grow grass and all, that soil was really damaged by in our area centuries of farming and a lot of your area, Lisa, as well. The good ground got just farmed all to death, and so what the systems we have now are really dependent on us putting back fertilizer, putting back stuff to help the plants to do well. And the goal should be to have them do well without having to put all that stuff on. And so we hear about that. It sounds too good to be true. Maybe in some cases it probably is. But then again, there's a lot of other things that we can do that are not, that really are good and really are very efficient, and we can build some really great systems if we'll think about it. So that's what I want to end with is sort of some long-term thinking about what do we do to really make a big improvement in our forage systems here. So the short term, what are we going to do in the next month or two? The number one thing is to think about how you feed hay. Even if you just continue to do exactly what you're doing, think about how could you more effectively and efficiently feed that hay to get manure distributed around the farm. That's one of the real, what I call low-hanging fruit. We already are feeding hay. It's just a little change in how we do it. We can grow a lot more grass with the manure that comes from that. So I'll talk about that in some detail. Frost seeding clovers, I'm just going to mention that, but the next month is the time when if you've got land that can grow clover, putting a little seed out there and letting Mother Nature freeze thaw and get that seed in the ground, those stands can be exceptionally good. So it's very inexpensive and practical to do that. And so something that should be on your list of maybe I should think about doing something like that. We'll talk about it in a little more detail. You can use early fertilization to get started a little early with the grazing season, and especially especially if you have something like ryegrass or something that you've planted some annual that will really jump out and make a lot of yield early, then that's something that definitely is something that you could benefit from. If you've got toxic fescue, then maybe that early nitrogen probably not going to help you because it's not going to be, it really generates a lot of toxins when you do that. But something to think about. We have options sometimes to do that. And then if you're going to be planting annuals this summer, obviously right now is when you need to be studying the catalogs or it's all online mostly now, but studying those different varieties and what you might be able to get and make sure that you get something that's going to fit the need that you have. Most of you are going to have perennial pastures. Your dams are going to be doing very spotty kind of seeding, maybe in a renovation or something like that. So, but it's the time to be thinking about that before you have to do it in a rush when planting season comes. So, so this is a picture of a central feeding area, and just pretty much every cow farm in our area looks like this right now. Except I will say this year it's kind of dry, so those ruts down in the bottom, we hadn't had too much of that yet, but it's coming. When animals stay in an area for a long period of time like this and are fed in the same spot, then basically the sod is completely destroyed and it turns into mud. And the logic is, well, we don't want to tear up the whole farm. We want to just keep it confined to this one pasture, this one spot in that pasture. We know it's going to get to be a big mess, and we just don't want to spread it over the farm. So that's kind of our traditional way of feeding hay. And Lisa, you see it up and down the road as you go. Everybody does it. It's near a gate, near a road, near a barn. Some way it's a convenient place to try to feed hay. And that's the way, I did it my whole life like this. That's the way we've always done it. Now, this next graphic is a shot of a farm down in eastern North Carolina. We're back about, now 26 years ago. I realized looking at that date, it doesn't seem hardly possible. But we used something new at that time called precision agriculture, and we went and we took a bunch of samples. There were 300 samples went in to make this map. And the orange areas are low, very low in phosphorus. That's one of our main soil nutrients, and it's a good index of the kind of how much fertilizer the soil has had or how much fertility it has. And then the yellow is kind of adequate. Once it gets yellow, it's pretty getting pretty high. And then where it's green and blue, it's super high. And so those indexes of 4, 5, 600, that's like enough phosphorus to where you'd never have to add it for 100 years, and you would still not run out of phosphorus. I mean, it's super, super high. And if that soil erodes off of those spots, that's phosphorus that goes in our creeks and stuff, and we don't want that. So if you look at this central area here that's white, that's where all of our buildings and our barns and all of that kind of stuff are. And as we manage all of these areas near that are places where a lot of hay's been fed over the years, and you can kind of see down in this part of the farm, there's another big little pattern there. That's a sandy ridge, and that's an area where you can stand cows and feed hay without it getting too muddy. So those areas show up, and that's basically where all the hay feeding's been done. And there's plenty of other areas where it needs fertilizer. And so we tend to fertilize these areas, and it's a shame that we have these really high fertility spots that develop in the pastures. Now, we've done this same kind of work in more recently. We've done quite a bit of it, mapping different farms of farmers and research stations and stuff like that. I'll just show you one. Um, this one is our research station near Butner, and it's a this three pastures here are used for winter feeding. And I think you can see these dark areas are where we are basically feeding hay. And I think I've got some arrows that are going to slide in there. So those are where it's kind of high in the landscape. These two buildings down here are hay storage barns, and you can go in the gate, put the hay out, and this slopes away as you go down the hill there. So that's kind of the setting. And for a couple of decades, basically, that's just where cows have always stood and always been fed hay. So we went in each of these little black dots with the label on it is where we took an individual soil sample. So we sampled these pastures, and there's about 125 samples there to come up with, again, a little map to give us an idea of how's the fertility distributed in these pastures. And so this is kind of what you'd guess, I guess, if you thought about it. The size of that bubble is basically represents how much phosphorus is in those spots. And so, as you can see, I mean, there's super low levels and there's super high levels. It's not well distributed. So we need to remember and think about it. All of our farms, we don't have this kind of map, but all of our farms look just like this. You know where those spots are. You know where you fed hay, where there's manure year after year after year. And basically, those areas do not need anything but maybe a little bit of nitrogen, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But that those are so loaded that we need to get that manure somewhere else. So we're using a variety of tools to get that done. This is a shot of grazing stockpiled fescue, which when you graze and you strip graze with electric fence, the animals very, very efficiently spread those cow pies across the pasture. And if you do this every year, it really does start to make a big difference on that fertility pattern. So that's one way to do it. But the idea is really to manage your forages to improve how those nutrients are distributed on the pastures. Now, we have a lot of people that do unrolling of hay, and this is my own farm. A lot of these pictures are going to be stuff I do. We have this little buggy that we pull behind the four-wheeler that's called a hay bagon, and it's also Greg Judy hay unroller is the other one that's almost exactly like this. But we can take and unroll a bale various places on the back part of the farm. And so you can see some broom straw and maybe some blackberry bushes in this picture. And this is an area where it needs fertility. I mean, it's just we don't put out a lot of fertilizer, and you can just kind of tell these spots have a lot of broom straw or whatever. And if you'll unroll a hay bale there, the next year you can make it's amazing how much grass will grow in that spot. So if you think about that, again, getting these cows away from a central area where they can eat some hay and drop that manure where it's not right in a muddy mess that's just gonna grow weeds next summer anyway. The other thing I want to mention this a little bit more detail maybe is a practice called bale grazing. If you read a lot of the magazines and stuff like that, you may have heard of this, but it's a practice where you basically plan a hay feeding for a month or more, and you put that hay out in a grid pattern. And so basically, that top photo is my flatbed dump truck that I've used to haul hay for a long time. But basically, I can by myself go out there and put out all these hay bales. And then in the bottom, basically, as you feed it, you're basically running a temporary electric fence and exposing in this case, just a couple of bales at a time. And this is a group of replacement heifers that stayed in this area for over a month of just going to that next set of bales. And so You don't have to drive out there on a tractor when it's wet. You can just, I just like walk to this pasture. I don't have to rut it up. And it's really something that I was very skeptical when I first saw this. I was like, nay, no way. I'm not putting my hay out in the rain for a month. You're kidding me. Well, in the winter, it doesn't really spoil. It's cold and it kind of it gets some moisture in the surface, but it doesn't rot. So I've proved myself wrong on that. But anyway, we've been doing a study on this in 5 different states. We're looking at how it impacts the soil and that sort of thing. So you'll hear a lot more about it in the future. But it's a great labor. That's the main thing is when you are busy and you come home at night and it's dark and you're like, oh no, instead of having to crank the tractor, try to go put out hay, you just go move a ring and move a wire, and it makes a big difference. So something for folks to think about. Now, this is kind of a weird shot, and Lisa, this is off of our county GIS system, and I was looking for something else, and I ended up looking at the map of our farm from the time when that particular bale grazing demonstration was going on. And it was a random thing that they took that picture that same about the same day as I took that picture of the heifers in the field. So this bottom panel shows the males ahead of the heifers, and then it shows where they've cleaned those up and where they are on the bales at that time. So anyway, this is kind of interesting. Then I saw that and I was like, wait a minute, what are these weird crop circles and stuff on the back part of the farm? You see, there's these, it's this weird pattern. And I realized that's where I had unrolled hay bales with that little hay unroller machine all for like a month for a group of cows and gradually moved over that whole field. So, if you start doing this and you do it for about 20 years, wow, suddenly this whole field gets really fertile and starts growing a lot of grass. So that's kind of the take home message on this stuff is you think about getting that hay manure away from the barn and out on the pastures where it can grow some grass. And this particular pasture in the bottom with the bale grazing, you see these torn up areas. Um, at this point, we're following these pastures and we're 3 years after doing this. Those are the most fertile and the best grass in the field are around where those bales were. So it's something that it really does end up working out, and easy to be skeptical and just say nah, we're not doing that. But sometimes some of this stuff's pretty cool, and this bale grazing is something really to look into. Okay, that's enough of that. Frost seeding clover. Um, don't do that, don't know about it, you can put out clover around, late January, early February, when it's still freezing at night. And if the ground's been grazed and kind of grazed down, which most folks have got it grazed down by that point, you can go out and broadcast that seed. Clover seed is really small, so you might, if you've got just a big, this fertilizer broadcaster, you might have to mix it with some sand or some pelleted lime or fertilizer or something like that, something as a carrier. But you can go spread like, 2 or 3 pounds of white clover seed and maybe up to 10 pounds of red clover seed. And it'll take really well because the freeze thaw on the soil will get it down in there and it'll grow. Now, you need fertility for clover. If it's really acid, less than 6 on pH and that sort of thing, it's may not be worth doing it, or if you're very low fertility. But a lot of these pastures ought to have clover in them. And as I go around, I go to farms, we just don't see near as much clover as we ought to. And again, that nitrogen that it brings in from nitrogen fixation is just hard to to pay the bill, the fertilizer bill to replace that now. So we all need to be trying to get more clovers in our pasture. And we have, where I am and where you guys are especially is really good clover country. That bottom picture is just a June picture from basically that area where I showed all those crop circle squiggles on there. That's that same pasture where we've unrolled hay for so long. And We frost seeded it years ago, and now it makes its own seed. But having that clover is a huge game changer. And so again, something you can read about and learn about. There's a lot out there about it. Okay, I'm going to switch to some of these medium term things, and and I'm just going to list a few here, and I'll talk about a couple of these in detail. But we really need to be doing rotational grazing, and a lot of people, I still work with farmers who are like, no, I don't have time to do that. My cows rotate themselves around the farm. It's fine. They know what they're doing. Well, cows do not know how to take care of grass. They will overgraze it in places, undergraze it in others, and you're going to be well served if you have some cross fencing and do some level of rotation. Even if you only rotate it every couple of weeks to a new pasture, you would improve your utilization quite a bit. So something that we really need to think about. Um, Once you rotationally graze, what you can do is use a technique called turn out early and rotate fast. And one thing that I was taught growing up was you never turn out early because the pastures never grow out like they should. So if you turn them out like 2 weeks before the grass is really ready, they graze it real short, and then it just won't grow. And that's true if you are continuously grazing. If you've got them held up where you're feeding hay, and they're gonna be able to run over the whole farm. They will mess it up. But if you are rotationally grazing, you can start out when it's pretty short, even when it's only like 6 inches tall. A lot of that is going to be tall fescue that's going to make a seed head. And so as they graze that, the seed heads aren't out yet, but they'll kind of knock back that fescue that really is going to be the dominant one. And as they get to when you get around in the rotation to where the seed heads are starting to come up in a boot stage, they'll start to eat those off. And our goal at home is to try to get all the way around in the first in like 2 weeks. So we're moving them every day to a new pasture, and they kind of get that little spotty stuff that they can get to, and then we move them on and leave everything else. And what happens is they control a lot of the seed heads. So once you get into June, what you have is instead of a whole bunch of fescue seed heads, you have fescue leaf and you have clover and you have other stuff that takes more light. So and the seed heads kind of suppress. So that technique works really well. Um, I think we all need to be thinking about these winter feeding areas when we get out and we finally turn out. We've got these places we've been feeding hay. Usually they just grow up in weeds and then we bush hog them and think, what a mess. So I'm going to show you a little bit about something you can do with those. And then I just want to stress, I try not to do a talk and not say this, but all this stuff doesn't matter if you don't do a good job with your cattle management. So, uh, you know, keeping their health good, learning body condition scoring, all of those tools that we have will help you get the most out of the forages. Great forages and sorry cattle, it's not optimum, right? So we need to marry both the really good forage management, really good cattle management, and then you see the benefits coming to you. So I want to focus on rotational grazing. We teach this in our amazing grazing program that basically is our grazing management education program here in North Carolina. We want to get people to rotationally graze because we know that you improve your forage utilization by about 30%. So that's pretty significant. I mean, that's a lot of grass that you get down the throat of the cow that does not get wasted. And so if you think about this, one of our problems is a lot of folks, when I go out to farms, many people are kind of overstocked, especially now with cattle so valuable. I mean, they're really pushing it. They're buying a lot of hay. They're really pushing that stocking rate. And if you find yourself in that situation, if you just say, okay, I'm going to start rotationally grazing and you start setting that up, that changes everything because you're going to be getting more of the grass in the cows and they're not suddenly you may not be overstocked anymore. So thinking about how that rotational grazing can help you. And don't think about you got to move them every day or anything like that. At home, we do. We've evolved into that over decades. So even if you just move them every couple of weeks, then that's a good place to start. And most of us have enough pastures to where we could do something like that. Um, One thing, if you don't do temporary electric fencing, it's another one of those game changers. I don't see how you can do good cattle management without it. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. We have a program called The Power of One Wire, and my colleague Johnny Rogers is a really great guy, and he comes from East Tennessee there, so he grew up around that area over there. But he came up with this because he realized that people for rotational grazing, that's a good use for polywire and it does work well. But there's a lot of other benefits that maybe are even more important than just being able to move and do rotational grazing. So we talk a lot about this, but I'm going to show you a little graphic here. Hopefully this is going to work, Lisa. It did earlier on, but if it doesn't, that's fine. But basically, the idea is that what we're trying to get people to do is, okay, you've got pastures with permanent fence. Use temporary fence and start to divide it, even if you just divide it one time. So this is an example. Basically, the blue dot down here at the bottom is a waterer. There's a gate over here. There's a cow, a group of cows, but I didn't, when we made this, we didn't want to put a whole group. It's too hard to manage the automation, but the gate's right there. So what we're going to do, instead of letting them into this whole pasture, we're only going to let them into half. So the little white dot here, we like to use a solid post, typically a 7/8 inch fiberglass post, but you could use a T post if you put an insulator on it, anything like that you can use. And then we put a poly wire single strand electric fence, and this is after the cow knows what it is. You have to put it up in, along the edge of a pasture or something if she's never seen it before. But once you get through that initial training, putting up that poly wire, and then dialing it off to this white post, and then pulling it here to the right to this side of the waterer, so that when the cow comes in the pasture, the herd of cows, they can graze, they can do their thing. And then when they utilize the grass on this side of the fence, you can just walk down there. And what you'll find is as soon as you do, and especially this after a couple of times you move them, the cows are like, okay, this is going to be good. We're going down here. They'll follow you down there. You basically reel up that little gate that you made, and they walk right past you into that new piece of pasture. Now, then you dally it off, and there you are on the other side of the water, and basically, you've divided that pasture in half. So what you've done effectively with that little thing is you doubled your stock density. The stock density is how many cows are there per acre at a given time. So you've doubled that with this pasture, and we know as you continue to increase stock density, you get better and better grass utilization, and the manure is better distributed. So those are two things. This side over here gets rest now longer than it would have if you'd left them over there. We learned to use temporary fence, and your cows start to learn it. There's nothing fancy here, and maybe this is 3 or 4 days on each side or whatever it happened to be. Um, and you started training your cattle to the fence. The other thing that you'll start to see with this kind of management is when you stand there by that gate and they walk past you down there. Suddenly, every cow comes and shows herself to you. You see their eyes, you see if they're lame, you see if they're springing up with a calf. You start to see every cow. It's close up. And we're not used to that. We're used to going out and the cows are kind of out there. They're like, uh-oh, here he comes. What's going on? If we don't have a feed bucket, chances are they're going to be like out there not wanting to come close. But once they're used to going real close to you, you can do all kinds of things with them that you couldn't do when they were just used to being in that whole pasture. And maybe you could call them to the gate with a bucket or whatever you have done. So I'm going to show you a couple of these, but one of the things, there's about 10 things you can do with polywire that's really neat once the cows know what it is. One of the things, if you've got a herd of cows here in this pasture and you got a lame one, you can get two people on a poly wire, and you can sort one out. And so basically you do it just like that. That there's a gate up there at the corner of that field, and you can literally just get one and get her out. Now, if you're alone, you can hook the end of the reel up here on the gate, and then you can walk around and you can basically just reel them in by yourself. Once they're used to that poly wire, even with no power on it, they do not want it touching them. So they go and they do what they want you to do. And they're used to being close to you and doing this kind of thing. So suddenly you have this control over your cows that you never had before. And that lame cow or that very first that weepy eye that you're wondering, oh gosh, is that the first case of pink eye? Well, get them right then and treat it. And if you had can handle them like this, then it's a lot easier for you to do that. This is my favorite place to use it. This is the working pen where we work cattle on our farm, and actually we bred heifers here this morning in the same deal. And the way this is designed, we had to get them through that gate up there in the corner where those calves are headed. And it'd take about four people to get a little group and get them up into that corner. Two people couldn't do it. The outside pin is too big. And so we had to have at least four people to work cattle. Well, once we realized we had the power of one wire, two people can do it. And so this is I'm on the reel and I'm taking the picture. That's my nephew. And we were working the calf, a whole, like 100 calves together, just the two of us. And there they go. Once you've got that wire, they're just like, nope, that thing, we got to go in the pen. And so anyway, it's amazing. I don't know how I would really manage without this. We do all kinds of stuff. We have to sort cows quite a bit, and we finish some cattle, and so we can use this to sort off the ones we're sending to harvest and that sort of thing. It's very beneficial. But the big thing is once you get into where you can use rotational grazing, this is the way we do our system at our farm. We basically have big pastures. We don't do a lot of back fencing. We'll let them go for about a week without a back fence, and we just move the front. This is called frontal grazing. So we every most of the time every day we'll go check our cows. We move the fence, and in about this is a herd of 100 cows. In about 30 minutes we can move the fence, check everybody, and then go on to do the next chore. And it used to be to check the cows, I'd spend 2 hours driving all around and never could find them all. So so it really helps us with again that close management of the herd. Okay, switch gears. This is going to be like different pieces, like chapter 4, cleaning up winter feeding areas. This is something we always need to do this. And especially those that have a central feeding area. And even if you don't, even on our farm, this is my farm. This is where we were feeding our heifers all during our AI program and then trying to wait for some grass to be ready. And I couldn't really move them. It turned really wet and it turned into a big mess. So again, the rutting, you can see all the rutting from the tractor. See a little hay trailer out here in the corner, and we moved that around. And they were okay. They did great. They did good. They bred and they gained some weight and everything, but it was miserable. I didn't enjoy it. But we got to this point and we were like, okay, we got to do something with this. We're not going to let it be all weeds. And so we started. That's how it looked that day. We went ahead. This is that same day. We got a little cultivator out and started tearing down the ruts and tearing down the piles of hay and stuff like that. Got the hay trailer out of there. Um, we actually decided to disc it at that point. We decided that whole field was just a mess and it was really toxic fescue anyway. So it didn't break my heart to go ahead and run a disc over it and kill that fescue. And we really want it to be Bermuda grass based on the way we're hand using this field. So that was okay. So we tore that up. Then we went ahead and we disced it, and then we used a chain drag to smooth it. That's April the 18th. So about about corn planting time for us here. Um, and then after we kind of let it settle and stuff and got it ready to plant, that's what it looked like. So the plan was to plant crabgrass, and quite a few different varieties of crabgrass now that you can buy. And we know little crabgrass in your lawn or stuff. Don't just forget about that. Probably that kind is not very productive, but you can buy these varieties that are pretty inexpensive. This you can get it for around. It's going to cost you around maybe $30-$40 an acre to put it on. And so you want to get a firm seed bed like this. And then I'm I'm putting out the crabgrass seed, and you only put around 4 or 5 pounds per acre. This was quick and big crabgrass was the variety that I used. And you can if you quick and big, you can Google that, or Dalrymple Farms is where that comes from. We have Barenbrug also has Mojo crabgrass, and then there's Red River crabgrass. So there's several that are available. Um, but this is in pelletized lime as a carrier, because trying to put out 4 pounds of crabgrass seed is it's kind of so you don't want to put it all in one spot. So using that carrier helps. And we put that on and did not run the drag over again. I would have, if I had this to do over again, I probably would have put a cultipacker over it, because it really did not rain for a while after that. So that kind of slowed us down. But we did get a rain after a week or two after doing that, and within a few days we had a lot of crabgrass coming up. And so if you're not there's just a little I think that's actually a 1/4 inch bolt, so that's pretty small. These are little crabgrass seedlings here. But I think you can also see there's a pigweed, spiny amaranth seedling there, and you see there's quite a bit of that. So these winter feeding areas are going to be a weedy mess if you just let them go that way. So again, a little bit of care, a little bit of thinking and planning. This again, we got a little bit of rain. We didn't get as great a stand early on as we wanted, but it did rain about that time, about the 1st of June. We really got some good rain, and so it started to take off. And then by the 22nd of June, it was suddenly knee high and full of pigweed. So we sprayed it with Duracor, knowing that this is, we kind of knew what was coming, a lot of stuff. Had a very, very good outcome on that, very good kill, and it pretty much turned into pure crabgrass for the rest of the summer. And then only a week later, it was above knee high, and we grazed it for the first time. And that's a group of finishing cattle that we got from that. So again, think of that. That goes from like the 1st of May, we put out seed, and here we are just about 7 weeks later, and we got grass like that. Now, there's a lot of details here. I'm not going to go into all of this, but it was a small area. It was less than 3 acres. We planted quick and big. We were able to graze it there starting June the 23rd. We got a second grazing July 25th. So about just about 3-4 weeks later, it's ready to go again. We got a third grazing in August, and then we got a fourth grazing in September. So if you estimate from the number of animals that I ran across there and what forage we got out of it, it was about 6,000 pounds of forage per acre. We did a budget on it. We did charge ourselves for the tractor and all that sort of stuff to make sure we were being fair. 72 an acre for that. We put nitrogen on. I put 100 pounds of urea. Basically, was the only nitrogen that was put on that. The seed, 5 pounds of seed, 35 an acre. We sprayed it that one time. And basically what we ended up with is we got about, cost us about 50 cents per grazing day for those calves or yearlings or whatever we had out there. And so some cheap feeds compared to what everything else we have right now. So basically the lesson to me and to folks I talk to is, cheap we need to make more of our forages. This is the only way we can get cheap feed now. There's no such thing as inexpensive feed anymore. It used to be there was, but we just it's not. Hay is expensive and concentrates are crazy expensive. So the dry matter in this crabgrass that was this particular cutting averaged almost 16% protein and TDN in the 70s, which is like again like concentrate. We had $50 a ton in that, and so that's some cheap feed. So anyway, okay, so you get these winter feeding areas, clean them up and use those nutrients there to grow some grass. And so that's the take home message on that one. So longer term, we need to do a better job of our overall pasture management. And this is something that every one of us can do a better job of what we do. And we really need to we need to learn how to assess the condition of our pastures. We don't, we take it for granted a lot of time. Maybe we don't even walk out in the pastures to all corners of it, but we should really make a habit of walking pastures. These pastures are a really fascinating ecosystem. There's all kinds of species of plants and animals, little tiny stuff. There's insects living under the surface of the soil, all sorts of things that it's fascinating. And if we're going to get into that regenerative kind of agriculture and build soil health and do that, have that goal, we really need to go out there and keep our feet, put our feet on the pasture and be an active part of what's going on out there. So we need to learn how to assess them, and then we need to figure out, okay, what can we do to make better use? What can we do to upgrade it? Do we do a partial renovation, a complete renovation? Lisa, hopefully you'll get lots of those kinds of questions and get to help people, do these walks and do this thinking because it's critical. Um, and just to build soil health and plant diversity and get to the point where you have a system that just doesn't need herbicides, doesn't need much in terms of fertilizer, and grows a lot of grass. I mean, I think that's what we all want, right? So it is possible, but we've got to study on this. So I'm going to suggest this, and this is I don't know how many of you have used this kind of thing, but NRCS has done a really good job of developing a pasture condition scoring system. And it is a way a way you can go through with a little score sheet and think about different things. It guides you. So there's a worksheet that you use, and there's a guide with a lot of detail on helping you understand that. But it's really a great way to go out and just say, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. I'm gonna do this pasture condition score on this pasture, and then we'll do what we want to do to improve it, and then we'll do it again in a couple of years and see if we've improved. So Lisa, as we go start working with farmers, and this is a really good thing to go out and help them actively start looking at this kind of stuff and keeping track of it. And some of us are forage nerds and it's easy to get it done and that sort of thing, but everybody really should be taking this seriously. So there's a lot here. I don't want to really, again, I don't want to just drivel on and on about it, but there's a lot of things that affect the condition of a pasture. How many desirable plants out there do you have? And in other words, how much undesirable do you have? What's the legumes, clovers? How much clover do you have? How much live cover is there? How much of it is dead grass and how much of it is green growing grass? How diverse are the plants? Is it all one? Is it all just nothing but Kentucky 31 tall fescue, or is it got three different kinds of clovers and orchard grass and bluegrass and all of that? Um, is the residue? Is there some residue covering the ground where maybe you have a bare spot or something like that? Is it grazed? Is it overgrazed? What's the grazing severity? Livestock concentration, these feeding areas, are they in there? How vigorous are the plants? And then a little bit about the soil, so the encouragement is take a shovel with you and dig some soil samples and look for compaction and roots and color and signs of biological activity. And then also look for signs of erosion. We should not have almost no erosion in a good pasture. So if you've got these little galded spots where cows rub and you've got an eroded spot or whatever, stream banks that are eroded or whatever, that's what you're looking for there. So basically these are all things that are on that worksheet and it'll help you. The guide again will help you understand why you would want to do each of those things. Again, ask your agent to come help you. So that'd be my advice to you. And this is one of our students here on a pasture research station, but we do this a lot to try to document, how good of a stand do we get on fescue or whatever. And so this is a system called the point step. So this actually is the way that you get you start learning about the diversity of the plants and what plants are out there. And it's called a point step assessment. And again, I don't have time to get into all the details of this, but I will show you that basically what you do is you just have a check sheet on that clipboard and you make a dot on the end of your boot and you look down and you say, okay, what's there after I take every 20 steps? You look down and okay, it's tall fescue or it's orchard grass or it's a buttercup or it's something, I don't know what it is, but it's got spines all over it. It's not good. It's undesirable. Or it's bare. That's one of the common ones. So we have a handout on this, Lisa, that explains the system and stuff, and it's available as part of that handout that I gave you with all the links. So it's pretty common, and I think it's common sense. You're gonna wander all over this pasture, and at the end you're gonna have maybe 100 to 200 points, and you're gonna be able to find out, well, I got 29% bare ground out there. That's a problem, folks. You do not want that. And you've got 17% buttercups. Well, there's a signal for you. You got a little bit of problem. So again, I won't go into a lot of detail on how you'd use that information, but without the information, you just don't know. And a lot of farmers I work with on doing this, they will look out at a pasture and say, well, there's a lot of buttercups out there, obviously. And we do this when we do these workshops. And so then it's like, okay, well, let's do this. Let's walk out there and get this information. And so we, as a class, we break up and go different ways and come back together and write down what we found. And maybe there's only 3% buttercups out there, but you can see them. They're pretty. But when you go and look down, it's like, well, there's not many of them. So those kinds of things. Johnson grass is another good example of that. Johnson grass, you can have 20 plants in an acre and think you got a terrible problem. But when you go out there, maybe it's not that bad. So again, you kind of have to go out there and look down, and this just encourages you to do that. So the next thing that dawns on you is, wait a minute, I got to know what all these plants are. How am I going to do that if I don't know orchard grass from fescue? Well, okay, you should. Some folks don't. It's no problem. You can live without knowing that, but certainly once you learn to identify them, it's you can do it just like this, and so it will help you to do that. So you should know, those top 5 or 10 species on your farm. You ought to know those, and you ought to teach it to your kids. I guess that's the most important thing. We have so many young people that they just never learned that when they were walking around the farm with their folks. And so the significant grasses, the clovers, and then the weeds, the problem weeds, you really ought to know what those are and what you can do both culturally, without an herbicide to control them. And if you have a problem, then how to effectively use those herbicides. You don't have to be able to understand all the species. So what happens is you go out there and you realize, shoot, there's 30 different plants in this field. What am I going to do? The ones that are very minor and just a minor component, don't worry about that. You don't have to worry about that really, but a lot of times you can tell if it's desirable or undesirable, and that's that you can just say, well, it's something else, and I know it's not desirable, or it's something else. It's a green grass, so it would be desirable. So, um, and like me, I'm like, oh, I gotta know what it is. So then I got this plant ID app now on my phone that's just so cool that we all have that capability, and you can find out what it is, and suddenly you learned a new plant. So again, some benefit to doing this. The thing you really ought to know about is poisonous weeds, things like perilla mint and stuff that we know is really poisonous. You really ought to be able to see. You ought to see that coming. and not have it be the agent or the veterinarian that's like, oh, wait a minute, what's this plant over here they were eating on? Because that's bad when that happens. So there's not that many that are really, really poisonous, but there is a few that you definitely want to keep your eyes open for. Here's another resource that again is on the kind of our resource list handout that's going to be available to you. It's a website. It's got about, I don't know, it's got like 30 some pasture plants, not anywhere near all of them, but some of the real common ones that you would have that you have little short write-ups, kind of practical write-ups on each one. So that's something to look for. And we do a lot of with amazing grazing. We always have plants. That's one of the things. We always have plants. Lisa knows that from seeing me drag them in Virginia. But people, that's what we need to be learning about. And so people are attracted to that. So look at that. That's going to be good for you. We do need to think about, if we're gonna get into pasture renovation, once we've kind of figured out, okay, let's do something with these pastures. We need to think about why we're doing it. One reason that we have a lot of people now starting to think about this toxic fescue thing, and we all have figured out how to manage fescue with various strategies, but it never works completely. And you'll have a especially toxic year where it'll come back and bite you. So some folks have decided to start doing something about it, even and work very well just to transition some pastures over to something that's not toxic. So you can put your young calves there or your heifers or something like that. It's largely what we've done at home. Or maybe we want to put in native warm season grasses. There's a lot of people with interest in those kinds of other alternative forages. So that's one reason. The other reason is, well, maybe we've just got, we got pretty good pastures, but they've just kind of started to play out. And so maybe we don't need to do a kill and put all new, novel fescue or whatever. Maybe we just need to use a good herbicide and rest it and put some fertilizer and stuff like that. And the last thing we got to think about is, okay, why does this pasture need to be renovated? And I just want to, bring your attention to this horse pasture here. There's no reason why you should renovate that horse pasture. It looks terrible. You could say it needs renovation, but what it needs is to have no horses on it for a long time. So that's not going to happen. So, it's just if your problem is because of overgrazing, then you have to combine renovation with saying, well, I'm going to start rotating, or I'm going to do something, get my stocking rate down or something. There's got to be, once you identify why you need to renovate a pasture, then it ought to be something that that you fix the problem before you start getting it over your head. So, we talk about partial and complete renovation. Partial renovation, basically, maybe it's just you bought a new farm, the pastures are all broom straw and maybe some fescue and clover, but need some work. So you soil sample and do the pasture, do the plant species thing so you know what's out there. And then basically you can just do some fertility correction, some fertilizer, maybe lime. A lot of these pastures will need lime. Um, Herbicide if you've got like a horse nettle or some kind of a nasty weed that's really a high population. Then later going in and frost seeding those clovers and getting into the rotation, So that's a lot of probably nearly every pasture could benefit from all of those things from doing that pretty much every year. But a lot of pastures they just don't need to be completely redone. If you need to do a total renovation, or if you're trying to like put in the native warm season grasses or novel fescue or something like that, you do need to take it more seriously because it's expensive. So you want to make sure your fertility issues are corrected. You want to address, grazing management, make sure that you're not going to overgraze the new stand. You need to get the existing plants out of there. You can use glyphosate or you can use tillage, and I showed you an example of tillage, but in a lot of our novel conversions, we are using a couple of rounds of Roundup, and then hopefully no other herbicides after that for a long time. Um, we use an annual smother crop in a lot of situations, so like a summer annual like sorghum Sudan, to make sure that we smother a lot of the weeds and that we also smother any of the fescue that's left over if it's that kind of conversion project. And then we want to do a good job of reestablishing the new crop and taking care of that. So there's a lot. It's the total renovation is good, but it's beyond what a lot of people really want to do. If you have a specific pastures now, you might want to do that. If you have one that's torn up or one that really needs it, one that is very convenient for you to use for young stock or something, then maybe you do that total renovation. Otherwise, get on this partial renovation thing. Here's a couple of examples. This top one is a novel endophyte tall fescue field. Actually, that was Max Q tall fescue, was planted back in 2000. And this picture was taken about 2019. So it had been in 19 years and it had started to thin a little bit in a couple of areas and we were getting a lot of crabgrass. So what you're seeing here is one of the crabgrass areas. So what I did was just drilled more novel fescue into it in the fall, got the fertility right, and grazed that crabgrass down short so there wasn't a lot of residue, and then we drilled into it, and now this pasture is completely novel endophyte tall fescue now after this point. So all it needed was an over drilling with seed, and sometimes that's the case. The one below that is a toxic fescue pasture on the very back part of our farm that had not been bush hogged in like 3 years. And it was a stage of my career. I couldn't be at the farm a lot. The guys that were supposed to do this didn't do it, and it kind of got some big blackberries and mess on it and stuff. And so the right hand side there's not been black bush hogged. The left hand side was bush hogged in the fall, and it was not by design, Lisa. The bush hog broke down and we didn't get the other half done. But come the next growing season, it was amazing the difference just from getting it clipped when it needed it. And then we've since that time we're doing a lot better job of grazing management, and this area grows a lot of grass, and it really didn't need anything but to be clipped and to be grazed and managed that way. So, you don't always have to go to a lot of extent. This is a new planting of novel endophyte tall fescue that, again, up near the barn where we have our calves and our AI heifers and stuff like that. And boy, we really like the results in our AI program when we've got them on this non-toxic forage. And so we use it as kind of specialty for that. But again, we had to go through a lot to get it and keep it. And this is a first year stand, but this field now is a good complete sod, and we're real tickled with it. So I'm kind of coming down the home stretch, Lisa, and I don't want to go on too long, but I just want to remind everybody, fescue toxicosis is still a problem, and we have done lots of things, and I love to tell about a guy named Eldon Cole was a livestock specialist in Missouri, and he was a basically area agent is the role that he was in. But he saw so many things to solve the fescue problem that he started writing them down. And this started, about 30 years ago. He started writing this list of everything he heard that would help solve the fescue problem. He wrote it on that list. And he ended up with like 120 things on that list. And he retired a while ago and then recently passed away, but we still remember him fondly for the list that he developed. And you cannot believe the stuff that's been suggested that would solve the fescue problem. There's only a few on there that really work. Putting frost seeding clover into it, stuff like that really does work. But there's a whole bunch of foo-foo dust out there that's been thrown at the problem. And it's a real problem. It's a toxin that is very toxic to mammals. So we have to just be aware of it. Understand that when I did this study with the early Max, and this is the same day near our farm out on the research station. This is a heifer on toxic fescue. Wasn't Kentucky 31, actually was the same variety as the Max Q variety, Jessup. And this is a heifer on Max Q the same day. And that is how stark the difference was between those cattle. And we did this for 5 years. So by the time I got done with this, I was like, oh my gosh, we got to have this for our heifers, especially. And so that's what we've done, essentially done that at home, is to try to provide this kind of forage for the heifer program up through the time they wean their first calves. And that's really gone a long way to helping us, and we haven't had to do the whole farm. So, I run into lots of folks that say, I'm not doing that. I'm not planting that fescue, that new fescue. That's just crazy and so expensive and everything. And it is. So we do a lot of workshops on this, and we've asked folks, why don't you, and in our survey, if you're not going to plant, if you haven't planted it, why have you not planted it? And no, the number one thing is cost benefit. It's going to cost a lot, and we just don't think we don't understand if we're going to get the benefit out of it. Some folks just say, I just don't have the money. I just can't do it. Well, with today's cattle prices, that's not as good of an argument. It's a good time to say, I've got a little bit of money. Let's try to do something for the future. Um, some folks decide to plant with native worm seasons. That's great. We diversify the system. It doesn't all need to be fescue, so I don't have a problem with that. Some of us are on rented or land or real steep land that can't be reseeded and stuff, and that's understandable. You got to take that into account. And because if you don't have a long-term lease, you do not want to, go into a full renovation. It takes several years to pay off. Some folks just don't understand how to do it, and we in fine tuning this, we understand there's folks that just have never drilled grass. I mean, they've got a tractor and they got a farm, but they're not farmers. A lot of our folks are not farmers these days, and they need to learn how to do it. And so again, maybe they need to decide I'm gonna learn how to do it, rather than saying I can't do it because I don't know how. And then sometimes forage resources are lacking because to renovate a pasture, you have to take it out of production basically for a year, and you've got to come up with that forage somewhere. So those are all, we know that these are all the reasons people don't plant more novel fescue. And so we will continue to work on this because I think it's really good for us to continue to try to improve the system. I think it's still the place where I think we probably have the most losses of any single thing is the fescue problem. So I just wanted to mention the Alliance for Grassland Renewal. It is a multi-state effort, includes University of Tennessee. Bruno Pedrier is on our board, and we're really pleased to have Tennessee in that program. So you'll see workshops and stuff to again not to tell people they have to plant this stuff or they ought to, but that they ought to think about it, and they certainly ought to not plant something they know is toxic. And that's our main message now. Don't plant Kentucky 31. It's toxic grass. So if you're going to renovate, by all means, pay a little more for the seed. It will pay you back much quicker than if you actually plant Kentucky 31. And hard to understand that, but I saw these cattle with a farmer this day. We went and visited actually Johnny Rogers' farm. This is his bull calves. They were about 6 months old, and the farmer was not there to look at the calves. He was there to look at this grass. And he took one look and he said, "We're going to go home and renovate some pasture." And because this is possible, that no creep. I mean, those calves got it for milk, and because the grass was not toxic. So just want to, there's a lot of stuff coming up, but we do have a producer workshop that's going to be online coming up in February, a two-part thing, February 12th and 26th. It's improving the production efficiency of tall fescue-based forage systems. It's not all about novel, but novel's part of it. But it's going to help you understand how you can do some different things to really improve your system, including cattle genetics and other things that we know are going to be important in the future. So, Lisa, we hope you'll help us to distribute this. I know Bruno will, and again, an opportunity to get back online and do some good learning here in the evening, a couple of evenings in February. So I think with that, I'm going to quit. I'm again real pleased to represent the Amazing Grazing program. NC Choice is our local meats program, and we work together a lot because a lot of folks that raise like local beef and stuff, they right away are like, "Oh yeah, we got to have better forages," and so it's a natural for us to team with them. But anyway, a lot of good partners. So I mentioned Soul Water. I know you have them in Tennessee as well, NRCS. and the cattlemen's and all these other groups that support us. We really appreciate it. And I think with that, I'm going to take it off. I'm going to quit sharing. And if anybody's got a question or comment, I'd love to hear them. Looks like we've got a pretty small group, but sure folks have got some comments. Anybody bale grazing?
I haven't saw any in Washington County since I've been here with bell grazing. But it definitely works, especially at the Virginia research stations. They've showed so many demonstrations on bell grazing where it actually worked. So it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it is, and it's been a fun project, Lisa. We're into the demo phase of it now, and so the last 2 years we're going to do. Each of us is going to do like 15 demos. So across the 5 states, there's going to be a whole lot of farms going to try bale grazing. And it works. It's one of those things that once I tried it, it was like, oh man, this works.
I do have a question. To offset the summer slump, you talked about crabgrass as being a warm season grass, but would you plant any cool season grasses with that, or would you plant any warm season grasses in the midst of the fescue belt that does really well with the fescue, especially in our area, that can help with that offset that summer slump that we go through in the midsummer area?
Yeah, well, that it's a challenging question. The example I showed is kind of putting it on a place where there's not going to be good grass.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of your area up there, it's a cool season base does very well year round. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if it's drought in summer or whatever, you overgraze it, then it doesn't do well. But one of the blessings of tall fescue is it grows pretty much all
Year
through the
round.
summer if we get some rain. And
Mm-hmm.
so up where you are, we really need to, you might be thinking about a little patch of native warm season grasses or something like that that you could graze during June, July.
Mm-hmm.
The crabgrass, some people are putting in annual rotations, and we have one field that we do crabgrass, and basically it naturally reseeds itself after a few years, and so that's a natural. And then we do ryegrass in the wintertime, and
Mm-hmm.
that gets us out earlier in the spring, gives us some real high quality stuff there for a short time, and then it also gives us that crabgrass and there's some Johnson grass in that field too that comes in. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing you can do. If you want to do annuals, of course, sorghum Sudan is really kind of hard to beat, and the newer there's varieties now that are less prone to the aphid problem that we had a few years ago with the sorghum species before we had these better varieties. So look for something that's got some aphid tolerance and that works good. We also have a lot of people that like to plant complex mixtures of stuff. Raised Crazy Mix is one that we developed over the years, and that a lot of people that have, especially the finishers and stuff like that, like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
cowpeas and sorghum Sudan millet and some other other stuff, some brassicas
Mm-hmm.
and such as that. So there's a lot of options that you could use. But I guess my point is take good care of your fescue
Mm-hmm.
before you start looking for, so if you'll just not overgraze it and that sort of thing, then it'll hold up a lot better during the summer than when we abuse it and then look for something that's going to be better.
Yep. Because I think that we had producers this summer feeding hay in, I would say, or maybe it was last summer, especially in the midst of the drought, we were having producers feeding
Mhm.
hay in July,
Yep. Yep.
all the way through the winter time. So
Yep.
it's
Yep. Yep.
pretty
Yep.
rough on days like that. So,
No, I know, and I don't want to. I mean, it's easy to talk and just kind of be idealistic or whatever, but
mhm.
I mean, the reality of what we've been dealing with lately is brutal. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, it has been.
Helene,
Yeah.
Helene, we had what, three big droughts and Helene right in the middle of it all. It's like
Yeah.
what in the world? So so don't despair, you gotta keep trying. And
Hmm.
I feel good that a lot of sort of long-term things I've done for 20 or 30 years that I just thought
Hmm.
is this, everybody's like, that's crazy. You move those cows every day? That's crazy. Well, after a while, the cows are so easy to deal with that way.
Hmm.
They learn it. And then you really see the fertility and stuff bloom behind them. So
Hmm.
it's worth the effort. All righty.
Is there any more questions?
Hey Matt, I'm from down in Florida, but any thoughts on silvopasture?
Silvopasture, yes. Yeah. Great question. And there's a lot of interest in silvopasture. We actually have been visiting a lot of farms the last few weeks looking for bale grazing sites and a number of it's surprising how many people have started doing some silvopasture development. So I think it's a great opportunity for again for some summertime, some extra shade and such. And a lot of our small farms, well, I'm sure you guys know, you probably got wood lots that are not really managed for timber so much, and maybe we could open those up and get some light to the ground and get some grass going in there. We do have quite a few folks that are doing that and putting some native warm season grasses in a silvopasture area. You don't want a real heavy tree cover if you're going to do that, but it does give you a lot of shade and some good growth because again the low fertility needs of those native grasses, they're more suited to those what typically are pretty low pH soils there that are in where you might develop that. The other,
Hmm.
we have most of our silvopastures are being come from standing timber. Basically, they're thinning, maybe 20-year-old pines, or they're going into wood into mixed hardwood and thinning them out to considerably, leaving desirable trees. But we also have a lot of people that are interested in planting now. There's a lot of programs basically for tree planting, and so those plant silvopasture things where you plant the trees are a little bit more difficult to do because you have to protect the trees. But there's a lot of new technology being developed. Basically, again, the power of one wire. Here it comes again. They have these tree tubes that have a that are fixed so you can run poly wire up them, and that keeps the animals off the little tree and its tube till it's well established. So I would encourage it, wherever you have the potential to develop it. Are you thinking of developing some, or do you already have some?
Yeah, I've just been looking into it. Yeah, I'm just helping out on some farms, but it's just some thoughts I've heard from local people, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, the trees compete with the grass for light, and so you're not going to get as much growth as you get in an open pasture, but we've done a fair bit of research with silvopasture compared to animals that are out in the open, and they do stay cooler. Their body temperatures are lower. They tend to gain better, be in better body condition than the ones that have to stand out in the hot sun. And so it's a great thing, and I think again it's a little patchwork of a farm. It's if you've got a wood lot, you don't do anything with it. You
Yeah,
gotta
that's
think
super
about thinning some
important.
of those trees in.
Super important down here. You know, summer it's 90 and 90% humidity, so it's no joke, you know.
Yep. Yep.
Perfect. Well, Matt, I thank you so much. You are absolutely amazing, and I just thank you for all of the knowledge that you've been sharing. So, I'll have this uploaded on YouTube eventually, and then I'll send you the link as well.
Okay. Well, Lisa, thanks for what you do, and glad to still be connected with you. And good luck, and be glad to help you again.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye bye.